Okay, so I don't know if we got people who are continuing from last time around, but I'll give you my spiel one more time. Hi, I'm Jeff. I'm from the Northwest Agriculture Business Center, and we've been charged with organizing this whole track and all the workshops today. NABC, for those of you who know, is a private nonprofit 501c3, that our mission is to increase the economic vitality of the ag sector in 6 counties that we serve, which is King County up to Whatcom and out to San Juan Island. We do that by running workshops, bringing good information to farmers, conducting feasibility studies on behalf of farmers, business planning. We help farmers access capital. We help farmers access markets. We are also a USDA designated rural cooperative development center. Go on. And so we're pleased here today. Who here is a farmer? Who needs money with some mild strings attached, but it's actually kind of free? Okay, well that's what we're going to talk about today. It's a good thing. So I'd like to introduce you to Brandon Hoffman, who is the
Business and Cooperative Program Specialist.
There we go. There's specialist from the USDA. He's from the Vernon Office, Rural Development, and is the one in our region who manages this very, very valuable program that's provided a lot of value to farmers and a lot of good. And there was a study done in, I think it was March of 2018 by the USDA that 89% of the farms who have benefited from this program are in business and basically sustainable. It's just a great program that provides, working capital for farms in a variety of ways, which Brandon will explain. We don't have a lot of time. It's a very complex one, so we're going to do our best to give you the short study. But I'm going to let Brandon take it away.
Cool. Thanks, Jeff. Hey, everyone. So like Jeff said, I'm here representing the U.S. Department of Agriculture, specifically a small agency called Rural Development, focused on economic development in rural areas. I'm part of a 5-person or 6-person team in Washington State that administers our business programs, suite of funding programs. They're all federal programs. This is a federal agency. There's some loan programs in there and then a few grant programs. And I'm here today to talk about our Value-Added Producer Grant, or VAPG for short. Program. I'm going to do the quick version of this. It's a complicated grant program, but you'll get a pretty good idea or feel for what it is, what you could do with it, who's eligible, all of that, hopefully. If you're interested in a more in-depth presentation on value added, I'm doing one with the help, or NABC's organizing, and I'm talking at one next week, Thursday, at Skagit Farmer Supply in Burlington. So Jeff can give you specifics on that if you're interested in that one. So, Value-Added Producer Grant. What is the point? Why is this a program that the federal government created? The point is to help ag producers successfully produce, market, and sell a value-added product. The idea being that that will help them expand their market reach and end up with more revenue back in their pockets. And through those two things, will help strengthen rural economies. What is it exactly, or what can you use the money for? How much money are we talking about? 2 types of grants. There's a planning grant, which is for up to $75,000. Though that grant money can be used on creating feasibility studies and doing business plans. So this would be for a farmer, an ag producer, that hasn't started on their path to creating a value-added product yet, that's in the kind of investigation early stages. They can use that grant to go and hire a qualified third-party consultant to help them put together those 2 things, check the feasibility of that value-added product, and kind of create a roadmap for what they're going to do moving forward. The second type of grant we refer to as a working capital grant. It's the most common that we do. So this is for people or ag producers that are already started down the value-added path, or you can even be in the really early stages of it. Those grants go up to $250,000, and you use that money, or ag producers use that money on operational expenses associated with their value-added product. So you can't use it for growing something, raising livestock, harvesting, that kind of thing. It's all post-harvest, used on the value-added side of things, and it has to be an operational expense, which means kind of like a reoccurring expense. It can't be for purchasing equipment or building a new facility or buying land or that kind of thing. There is a one-to-one matching requirement. Yeah.
For wages?
Wages, sure. As long as they're associated with the value-added product.
Sure.
So creating that value-added product, marketing it, distributing it, yeah. And we'll get more into what exactly you can use the grant money on, but this is kind of a just general overview to get you thinking. What's that?
What's the definition of a producer?
I don't have it in here. Egg producer, you're growing, you're raising, you're harvesting some kind of raw commodity. Doesn't have to be that then ends up being the basis for your value-added product. So
So you can't be you have to be the producer who wants to extend their product line.
yes,
Their own personal product or what you grew on the farm.
yes. You don't have to be supplying every ingredient for the value-added product you're creating, but you have to be growing or raising or harvesting. And we see harvesting with like fishermen and some timber, related projects. But you do have to, it's intended to help ag producers, not people on kind of the second level that buy their raw commodity from somewhere else and then process it. So, thanks, good question.
You have to provide more than 50% of that raw commodity.
50%?
More, 50% or more.
Yep, so a majority of the commodity has to come from you. But,
51%.
yep, and you can use the grant to buy the remaining 49% or whatever. So as long as you're supplying the majority, you're okay. And like I said, you don't have to supply every ingredient. If your value-added product is salsa, you grow tomatoes, you have to supply 51% of the tomatoes needed to make that salsa over the 3-year period. You don't have to also grow the jalapenos and cilantro and whatever else goes into salsa. Okay.
Is that by weight or value of the commodity?
Weight, yeah. Whatever you need. As part of the application, you're going to create a plan. Or you say, over the 2-year grant period, we're going to make this much of the value-added product. So you determine how much value-added product you can make based on the raw commodity that you're producing. Okay.
It could be weight or inches, corn.
Some kind of measurement, whatever the typical unit is for whatever raw commodity you're growing or raising or whatever. Okay, applicant types, and remember this is the simplified version of this. So this is the types of applicants that are eligible to use the Value-Added Producer Grant Program. There are 4 different types. Independent producers, number 1, is the 95% of our applications. It's what most people fall into. If you're an ag producer, if you're growing, we talked about kind of the definition of that. Those are independent producers. The other 3 are different groups of basically independent producers, and I'm not going to get into them. I see a few co-ops every now and then. I think it's fairly self-explanatory. And we talked about this a little bit already, but every applicant must supply a majority of the raw commodity used to make the value-added product, and you need to maintain ownership of it throughout the process. You can't raise livestock and then sell them off to a processor. You can hire a processor to do that for you, and you can use the grant money to pay them, but you have to maintain ownership throughout. All right, so we talked about who is eligible for the grant. Now we're going to talk about how you show us that you're adding value, so we know that your product you're creating is eligible for the program. So there's 5 methods to show that you're adding value to a product. We're going to talk about 2 of those, the 2 most common methods. And no matter which you choose, you need to show in your application an increase in your customer base. Remember, that was one of the goals of this program. And you need to show greater revenue being realized in your application as part of this plan. That was the other goal. So the 5 different types of or methods of adding value to your raw commodity. You can change the physical state. I'll give you an example in a second. There's enhanced production methods like growing something organically, product segregation, we almost never see that. Renewable energy, so you're growing some kind of raw commodity that you then turn and use to produce renewable energy. Those types of projects are eligible. And the fifth one, and I'm going to talk about this more specifically because we get a lot of these, are locally produced products. And you only need to meet one of those. You don't get extra credit for meeting multiple, just meet one. It's an eligibility criteria, it has nothing to do with scoring. Physical state changes are defined in the reg as irreversible processes that alter the commodity and they add value. There's some examples down there. Milk into cheese, wool into clothing. It does not have to be a food product that you're creating. Or livestock into packaged meat. Or apples into bagged apples, sliced up and put into bags. It doesn't have to be a huge change. This adds value to the product. You open up and you can access retail markets and consumers will pay more for sliced apples in a bag. And that's the point. The second one I promised to go in to detail on a little bit more is locally produced. So consumers, customers have been shown to have a willingness to pay a premium for locally produced food. So that's another way to add value. Just, you don't have to change what you're growing, you just have to sell it, market it, distribute it locally, which is within either state boundaries or 400 miles of where it was grown. All right, back to how you can use the funds. Quick reminder, those are the maximum amounts for the two types. I'm going to be talking about what you can use the working capital grant for to cover.
It's a one-to-one match.
Yes, it's a one-to-one match.
For the planning grant and for the...
Yes, either grant type, still one-to-one match, but it doesn't have to be cash. So we'll talk a little bit more about how you can match your grant. So eligible expenses on the working capital side, I mentioned before that the planning grant was really specific in what you can use that money for. It's very narrow. On the working capital side, you can use your grant money to pay for processing costs, to pay for labor, utilities. I see a lot of utility bills, to pay for ingredients, everything else necessary to make your value-added product, the packaging, the labeling, to purchase additional raw commodity as long as it's less than 50%, as long as you're supplying the majority of it. Advertising, promotion, etc. It can cover a lot of stuff. Just no purchasing big pieces of equipment, no building facilities. It has to be kind of a reoccurring expense. You could use it to rent a building. That's a reoccurring expense rather than buying one. You could use it to lease equipment rather than purchasing the equipment. I did not, but...
Yeah, so for labor, you pay for staffing, but not for owner or family members who are employed.
Good point, but that can be part of your match.
Yeah.
Their time. So again, that was family members and you, the owners. We can't reimburse you for your time spent working on value-added stuff with the grant, but you can count that at a certain wage rate, whatever seems reasonable, as part of your match.
So like a second location would be eligible for value-added grant if you want to open another location?
If you were going to rent that space, possibly, and it all had to do with your value-added product. Ineligible expenses, I think I've hit most of these, or at least I've talked about the construction, the equipment, that kind of stuff. Remember, we can't use the grant to cover costs related to production, harvest, that kind of thing. You know, your whatever you grow or raise is harvested. That's the line. Everything from that point on associated with value added, we can use the grant for that. And your match has to be spent on those things as well. All of your match has to be spent on grant eligible expenses.
In the example that you gave about the apples,
Yes.
isn't it now like it's a processed food? So then you go into having a kitchen and all that. So all that is covered by that?
Yeah. Yeah, and the sliced, well, you could rent it.
About renting it.
You could go rent a commercial kitchen. Yep. Nope. So The question was about the apple example I gave earlier where they're turning it into sliced packaged apples. So I imagine they used once that apple is harvested, it's sitting there, it's ready, everything from that point on is eligible under the grant. So getting or renting a commercial kitchen, paying for labor to slice them up, or paying for processing. I imagine some machine does that, and you rent the machine.
Extra permits and things like that, that will be covered with that?
Yeah, permits and licenses related to the value-added side of things, yes. If it covers like your whole operation, both you as a grower and you as the value-added business, maybe we do half of the expense, something like that. We can work that out. So, with the Apple example, just to finish that thought, all the packaging would be eligible under VAPG, and then the costs of getting it out to retailers and consumers.
The cost of going out, all the shipping?
Yes. Shipping, sure. Farmers markets, paying for people to staff your farmers market booths, yeah. Yep. Okay. Matching. Equal to the grant amount, so it's a one-to-one match. Grant amount and match has to be at least the same. You need to spend it on eligible expenses, so only on grant eligible expenses. It needs to be spent in advance of the grant, and so the grant works on like a reimbursable basis, either monthly or bi-monthly. You and I will work that out. Can't have a conflict of interest there, so that kind of relates to what we were talking about with the family members. And we do verify it at application, that match amount is available. If it's going to be a cash match, we want it, and you're getting a $50,000 grant, we want to see at application you have $50,000 either sitting in the bank or a loan approval for $50,000 if you're going the cash match direction.
If it's your commodity product, you just do a projection of what your commodity product will be, what the value is, and how you think about on that value.
Exactly.
What do you mean you need to spend it before you receive the grant?
So what a typical reimbursement request, so you've been awarded a grant, say, and now you're going to actually do your value-added project, what you said you were going to do in the application. What that usually means is that every month or quarter, you and I figured that out, you send me a bunch of receipts for stuff you bought that are eligible under the value-added producer grant. I make sure you met your match, and then I reimburse you for all the things you bought, or wages you paid, or whatever. Sources of match, non-cash sources. I've been teasing this a little bit. The value of your commodity that you contribute towards the project can be a source of match. It can be your entire match. The milk that you contribute towards making cheese, it has value, and we can count that as match. So does applicant meaning the owner, or family member labor. At a certain wage rate, the time that you or family members spend on your value-added project, that can be counted as match. And you just log your hours, and we figure out a good wage rate for whatever kind of task you're doing. And that can be up to a quarter of the project. It's limited at a quarter of the project. So if you're doing, so in-kind labor can't be your only match, is basically what I'm saying, because you have another 25% of the project to match.
Is it a competitive program?
It is. It is. I'll get there in a second. Other two types, sources of match, third-party cash, third-party in-kind contributions, donated services, labor, that kind of thing. And my suggestion is you get a couple points. It is a competitive program. We do score these. You get a couple of points for making a cash match. In years previous, the register that told us how to score these didn't say how much cash match you had to make in order to get those points. So, you could make a fairly low cash match. But otherwise, the point I was trying to get to is that you don't get more points by making it more complicated. If you can cover your entire match with raw commodity and then make $1,000, $5,000 cash contribution towards the project, that's usually the easiest. But the other options are there if you need them. All right. What you would submit, how to actually apply for this thing. You're going to basically send us a big plan for your value-added project, which can go up to 3 years, but we encourage most people to just start with 2. We can extend it if necessary. That plan's going to be a big narrative about what you're going to do, who's going to do it, how much it's going to cost, when things are going to happen, the sources of funding, that kind of thing. You're going to do a couple of government documents, and you're going to have to register through DUNS. You're going to have to get a DUNS number through Dun & Bradstreet and then register with the System for Award Management, or SAM. It's a federal thing. It's kind of a pain, but it's doable. If you want to look at that whole plan, the work plan budget section there's a big template. It's a Word document template that's on the USDA's Value Added Producer Grant website, the one from 2018. It'll probably look fairly similar for the one that's upcoming, hopefully upcoming. Timeline, you guys will assemble an application. I'm available to help with it. I can provide feedback, point you in the right direction on things. You submit that to me before the deadline. I have no idea what the deadline in 2019 will be, or if there will be a competition. Hopefully there'll be one. Farm Bill's kind of in limbo at this point, and funding for this program is dependent on that, so we'll see. But I would imagine that there's probably will be a spring deadline, assuming funding works out like it usually does. So keep your eyes peeled for that if you're interested in it. Going back to the process, once you submit your application, hopefully before the deadline, me and my peers and I, we score the applications here in the state, then we send them to our national office. They farm them out to a team of independent folks. They're usually college professors in an ag field. They score them, they average the 2 together, and then they create a list in descending order of points nationally, and then they just work down the list and fund them until they run out of money. In 2018, I believe we had something like $18 to $20 million available nationally for the program. In Washington State, we funded 19 out of the 24 applications we got that we determined were eligible. So it's a pretty good, pretty good ratio there, in my opinion. And then once you're notified that you've been successful, we actually conduct the project. So I talked about that a little bit earlier. You get the green light to go, and then we work out a reimbursement process, and you do some reporting semi-annually. That's really not too bad at that point. I mentioned scoring and it being a competitive process and program. These are the basic criteria we score things on. And the idea here is we're trying to figure out the likelihood of success of your project, given what your plan is, given who you are and what your experiences are, who you have involved, how many unknowns there are still out there, that kind of thing. And I would suggest, if you're interested, get going on your application sometime soon. Don't wait for the announcement. When the announcement comes, you'll probably have like 3 months before the deadline, roughly, and put together a couple of drafts and send them my way, and I can give you some feedback.
Especially if you're, somebody who, your spring gets really intense, say, about end of February. Doing it now is better than.
I'd agree with that. And that's all I have. That's the short version of the program. There's my contact information. I'm the 4th one down. I cover the 6 counties in Northwest Washington. If you're not in my county, just get in touch with me anyway, and I'll send you the right person. You probably are if you're here. Yeah.
How many of these contracts are operating in your region?
I have a portfolio of probably 15 value addeds. They kind of skipped 2017 because of budget issues, and my 2016s are all kind of wrapping up. So maybe at the high, I had like 20. Yep. This part of the state does really well, Melissa.
Brandon, of the 19 that were funded, 15
Yes.
are in your region. Is that what you just said?
No, well, I still have some from 16. Yep, but probably over half of the ones this last year were up in this northwest part of the state.
The ones that NABC was affiliated with, I think it was like 11, was $843,000 of the 11 farms.
It's a lot of money that goes directly back to farmers. Any other questions?
Do you have like an example of an application that have been approved that we can look at it?
I can't give you an example of an application that's been approved because that's kind of the property of the person who wrote it.
I mean, without the names or anything, it's like
I could
the
try.
progress.
Get in touch with me and I could maybe see if I could redact one like crazy and get it over to you. Yep. Yeah.
Similar question, planning, like budgets, like are those feasibility studies available?
Could you?
You said like a lot of the money can go to like feasibility studies for like looking into markets or like what would be a good product. Are those results of those studies? Do those come back and become available at some point?
Oh, I don't think so.
No, they would be proprietary. This is all confidential information for an individual farm or group of farmers.
Yep.
I feel like it would be good, even if it was dated, like a year or two behind.
Yeah. A good source of information.
Yeah, I mean,
Especially
like,
if it's.
consultant can just take 50 grand and not really produce very much.
I.
Well, I wish I could take 50.
Like they're just producing a study, like
It's.
I've conducted a dozen or so myself, personally. And they're all proprietary. But I have in the past, I don't know if we're going to do it this year or not, but I do a workshop on feasibility analysis, and people do it themselves. And also, my dance card is usually very, very, very full, but NABC works for a very reasonable price.
I see your point. Something that's partially publicly funded, it'd be good if it were available to the public. It's good, but
open source, transparent government.
but remember that the individual farms paid for half of it too, so it's their call. Yeah. All right. Any other questions?
Should we have a panel and hear from people who've actually done it?
There we go.
Farms? From the mouths of farmers. That's the most valuable information. Layer farm in Everson and Whatcom County. When I first started working with Melissa back in 2010, she had 180 birds, and she has how many now? 3,000. So she went places. And Dorcas Young is from Whidbey Island, Letseti Farm. Dorcas came from Botswana with her own kale seeds and grows kale and dries kale and does value added and has found new markets. And so she won an award in 2016. And Susan Soltis, her and her husband Harley own Bow Hill Blueberries in Bow Hill. And I think NABC helped you with your first, and then it was so much fun she decided to do it again, and she won another one. And so they actually have the oldest blueberry farm, first blueberry farm from Skagit County, and do certified organic production, including juices and powders and pickled blueberries. Woo, good stuff. So great to have him here. Thank you for being here. Okay. So did I give you all my questions? Oh, here it is. Okay, I got. So, Brandon kind of explained it. I'm sure you've all understand it completely now, right? Well, yeah, maybe not. So I'd like to ask the panel, maybe just discuss among yourselves, what were the most challenging aspects, maybe 2 items or areas in preparing these grants and applications, and knowing what you know now, what might you have done differently?
Well, Jeff, first can we say what all our grants were for?
Okay.
Okay, so I'm Melissa Moeller, and I've gotten 3 value-added producer grants. The first one was to turn retired lane hens into soup stock. And then I did one on taking chicken manure and turning it into compost. And now I'm operating on a market expansion grant to sell eggs to more people.
My name is Dorcas Young. I live in Whidbey Island. Hopefully you can understand my accent. So I started my Well, I applied for my grant in 2016. I had no money, I had nothing, and my business was dying. So, and then I had brought this kale that I do the farmer's market. Most of the time was we make food booth, and I needed to do something to sustain it. So I went ahead and find out a class through WSDA online. I was searching for some grants, and I thought, wow. And then I sent email. For somehow they responded. There was a class happening. I just went ahead and take a class on 2016. And then they put a project together to help. And Melissa was the mentor and Jeff. And I said, well, I'm going for this. So I put in then, I developed my products, and I was already a food processor, certified by FDA and WSDA. So I had already my license done. So I went ahead and applied for the grant because I needed something. So I spent those months writing down, working with Melissa, and I had no idea, I had no knowledge, I had no nothing. But my tenacity helped, and I was able to do this. And right now we're doing great because I am able to sell them at the farmer's market. That's sustainable for me. And I just started Pike Place, and I was accepted there as a farmer and value added, and we grow on not only this, but we develop another product based on this, because this is ending, but I need to move forward with something else. So I'm telling you, I'm so grateful to be able to have gotten this, because my business would have just died.
Susan.
And I'm Susan, and he explained that we have a blueberry farm, and our first grant was to freeze the blueberries. That was our value add, and then jam and pickled, and then and some sauce, some other products, and then we did a second grant for the juice and the byproduct, which is the powder, and we've just completed that grant this past couple of weeks. So I consider doing another one for another product, but I don't know if we're gonna. That's under discussion.
So in
Okay.
terms of what's most challenging, I would have to say the application is very daunting. You know, it's a pile of paper about that big. But
Keep going.
it's very much worth it. I would have to say that like Dorcas, it saved my farm. It kept us being able to continue operating and growing and becoming more sustainable. And I just, to me, it's like every farmer should apply for this. There isn't probably anyone here who has a farm who isn't eligible for it, with just being able to sell locally. If you sell locally, you're eligible. And it's free money from the federal government. There's some strings attached, obviously, but it's one of the few programs where it's really all about helping farmers grow and stay in business.
And I'd agree with that. That was my big tip on it, as well as it allowed it. When you're in startup, it's very expensive. You make a lot of mistakes because you've never done it before, and it allowed us to stay in the black, because you will make mistakes with your packaging. It happens. You know, there might be a typo. You just don't know, or you'll hire an employee and they'll make a bunch of mistakes, and you'll come back to the farm and it's like, oh geez, wrong sticker, wrong bag, you know, and that'll cost you like, who knows how much, $200 that day, plus their time to redo it. So it allowed us to stay in the black. It's huge.
Yeah, it did help me. So for right now, my grant is gonna end. And during that period of time, I specialize in certain type of beans, and I make certain type of pastries, which we sell at the farmer's market. So we are moving into this one, and I'm determined to go for it, no matter how hard it's gonna be, whether it's gonna take me twice to get the grant. I'm not gonna give up. I'm just gonna keep going for it, because it helped me to be where I am, and to be able to, at least to have something to say to myself. I can buy a cup of coffee, you know, for myself, and then I can be able to manage my time and things and to learn a lot of things about farming and the health of the food and the local grown products, because I'm telling you, all these things my kale chip sells because it's grown locally, and that branding is amazing. At the farmers market, I do U District, West Seattle, and Pike Place we started, and Bayview Farmers Market, and we are there all the time, and I'm working all the time, doing maybe 18 hours to 20 hours a day, you know, that I do all the work. So I put myself right on it, but I'm telling you, as a farmer, it pays off. I was gone, now I'm alive. So with this, my next project is going for the beans, specialize in the beans, changing the state of thing. And to work with the Brandon, I'm telling you, I was saved. So I'm encouraging every farmer, start up, take a small bunch. You don't have to take a big grant. You have to work for a big one. Just get the one that you know it can help you to kind of stand up on the ladder. And then after that, you see, okay, I can work with these people. Eventually, it puts you in a level that you can, all of us, produce local food grown in Washington State, branded like that. It's amazing.
How big is your property?
Right now, I expanded last year. I'm gonna have 4 acres of land on top of the 2 that I have. So, yeah. So right now we have 2. We're gonna expand it to 4, to another 4, which means we're gonna have 6 acres of land. I got offered by one of the big farmers, and he's gonna help me to go through this because he has seen what I've done and he thinks it help. They are retired, but they are farmers. They're gonna just kind of mentor me through.
Did you say you rented?
Yeah, I'm leasing. About, it's gonna be 6 acres of land now.
How about you?
Our farm is only 5 acres. So it came with the plants on it though, so we kind of inherited what someone had planted in 1947.
Oh, wow.
Rubles.
Yeah.
So if you could all kind of describe and discuss, how the grant project and proceeds have impacted your farm business, and how did the results compare to what you expected? I think kind of Susan already alluded to, some trials and tribulations, but maybe just kind of, overall, especially, with Susan and Melissa over time, I mean, kind of, how's receipt of this grant really, helped your farm business and results?
Well, I think for us, one of the best parts of it is you really need to think through what you're going to do before you apply for this grant. So unless you're doing the planning grant, and we wanted to go for the operational one, so we had to create a business plan, and you go through and you really, you do your feasibility study, you figure out who you're going to sell to, you figure out what you're going to make and what it's going to cost, and you do all your budgets, and you've really got a roadmap of where you're going to go. So that's huge in itself, even if you don't get the grant. And then you'll likely get the grant, and then you'll work with someone like the NABC, or you can go to your Small Business Administration, and they'll help you as well. You don't have to pay $50,000 for a feasibility study. But you can also just search the internet, because there are feasibility studies on the internet. It depends what you're trying to do, whether you can find one or not. But they are also unique, that nobody is really going to do what you do. So that's the other thing. I mean, you can look at what they look like. That's probably it. But that's what really helped us really launch our business, is by just getting that roadmap and being prepared, and then knowing how we're going to spend the money. Again, even if you make mistakes along the way, you're going to learn, but that's where the grant comes in, to help you.
And I would agree with that. Just the planning process, just the application process forces you to put down on paper what you want to do, who you want to sell to, how much you think you can make, rather than, I think some of us just get so excited about growing and selling that it's hard to take that time to write it all out and really think it through on who your audience is. Just that process alone, whether you get funded or not, I think is really valuable in terms of refining your business and making sure that you can be sustainable for the long run. Obviously, getting the money is even better, because then that makes a bigger impact.
The other thing I would say, I took Cultivating Success, which is offered in different counties, and they basically, that class walks you through building your business plan, your farm plan, and your business plan. So if you take that course, then at the end of it, you're really pretty much ready to go to do your grant.
Yeah, I did that as well, and then I was able just to take that business plan and do copy and paste. Every grant application I apply for, it's pretty simple just to copy a section out and paste it into whatever kind of grant application it is, refine it a little bit, but to have that language so I don't have to reinvent the wheel each time.
When you say business plan, are you referring to there's 2 different sections of the class? There's the farm plan, and there's the more.
Well, there's the one, Cultivating Success is the one that you do the business plan in.
There's a
And then I
couple-
think,
There's 2 different ones. There's one that's the farm plan. Is that the
No, I think they're talking about the business plan, because because this grant is all about post-production.
Yeah.
And obviously you need, the farm plan to be able to achieve your market goals,
Yeah.
right? Because, and hopefully, and I was gonna comment, one of the things is that this, going through this grant process, because you're trying to prove to the USDA you're fundable. And so, it really kind of puts the onus on you to say, okay, well, I'm saying that I need this much money for these expenses. So you probably need to go do your homework and figure out really, if it's gonna be utilities, well, I need how much a month for utilities, and how do I get that number? Or I'm gonna order this much packaging, so how many units are you gonna sell and how much packaging? So you start getting those hard numbers, so you just, having to plan up front and really thinking about all these things, but this really kind of holds your feet to the fire. The same thing with markets is that you need to have letters of support for this grant. And so, usually, the grocers I work with won't give you, a guarantee, like I'm committing to this product, but they will, say, yeah, I'm excited to work with this person, and we're really, interested in what they have to sell. We think it's a good product. And so now you talk to the market, and when you talk to the market, you say, well, if I had the product, how much could you sell, and what do you think, and and you can start to build what your sales plan are. So this process really kind of holds your feet to the fire if you want the dough, which I think it's a pretty good deal, to really put those things together. And so results?
Results. We're still in business.
Yeah, we're still,
I mean, it's okay, the good, bad, and the ugly. I mean, yeah, it's so often, I've worked in the grocery business for a long time, and if you have a history, it's pretty easy to kind of project what the future is going to be. But when you don't have a history, it's probably, you say, wow, that didn't happen anywhere near close to what I thought was going to happen. So, I mean, and so you have to kind of be ready for that.
Yeah.
And then figure out how to shift and adjust to, so that you are able to, still leverage the value of getting those funds to be, like Dorcas is saying, now this is working pretty good, so I'm on to the next project, next product.
yeah, it's like I said, the package itself is pretty daunting, but you do your homework like these guys did and I did, and it was a very good thing to learn, because the package itself, you have to go through all this to be able to get there. But I'm telling you, these guys were so helpful, to give me the hints, these classes they took and all that. And I kind of went and took that and took that and took that. And before then, when I started, I was ready to go. And I said, I'm going to just do basic, simple one. And I did it and I got it. Now I'm ready for say, oh, maybe, because it just showed me success. I'm alive. I mean, everything was gone. And I said, well, I come up with a product, can I do it? And I went and do it, because I grow all my kale, I grow all my herbs that I add into this. And I make it so different, unique from the ones you find in all the market. And I do a lot of sampling, a lot of testing into the local markets. And I'm in two stores, 3 stores now. They are carrying this just because they go and sample at the farmer's market. Then I send them where to get it. And that was the success of helping me to be able to sustain where I am. So that's a good thing. For me, it was successful, because I'm still working.
So Susan, was the branding work done with the first grant or the second grant?
First.
The first grant?
Yeah.
And how long ago was that?
We bought the farm in 2011, and it was the labels. Yeah, we did the branding of our farm prior to that, but then the labels came out of that, and this is the second iteration of the labels. So we've started with one version and realized, we needed to change to another. But I would stress to hire a professional designer. It's really important, because you only get one coming out party. Just remember that. You only get one first impression, and it's got to be a good one.
Where do you sell your product?
We sell them at the co-ops and off our farm and the Bellingham Farmers Market and Hagen's. We just got into PCC with the juice and jam. And we're hoping to get into, we're in a place where we're trying to decide what's best for us, as far as selling retail is the best, right? But getting people to your farm and the farmer's market is a lot of effort, and not always possible, right? So online, we're really trying to build our online sales, but it's a mix. it's always a mix and it's always weighing it, like, do we wanna send it to Los Angeles to try to get in stores there, or we trying to get into Met Market, but we're not there yet, but that's where we'd like to be. So it's like, are we gonna keep regional, or what is the mix we have to do? Cause we're, in specialty shops around the country, but it's, that's not high volume. Specialty shops aren't high volume. So it's just a real mix.
Melissa, maybe you could just kind of describe to the crowd what you paid for initially for a carton, the packaging, and the labels compared to, having the label put on the carton and buying at scale. What was the difference in cost of goods per carton?
Sure. Oh, goodness, you put me on the spot numbers wise. So by being able to buy in bulk, I went from, I want to say the label was 48 cents and the carton was like maybe 95 cents a carton, to having pre-printed cartons that I buy minimum order 20,000 at a time for 17 cents each. So that was a huge savings to be able to grow that way. The first order I put in, I thought, well, okay, I just ordered 20,000 cartons. That's 5 years worth of cartons, but I saved enough that even if I'm out of business in 18 months, I still saved money and I could just like recycle them all. We use them, we keep ordering, we're now ordering that many every couple of months.
Oh, wow.
So those kinds of things that you're able to do by planning ahead and then by having the grant money that says, yeah, I'm just putting out a check for almost $4,000 for egg cartons, but how nice to know that I have that backing, that next month I'll be able to do my draw and get part of that back.
And I just reduced my cost of goods from, $1 to 17 cents or whatever. I mean, that's a pretty big deal.
And then the time too, not having to stick every one of those labels on, and if you have it crooked and.
Yeah.
Right?
All of that.
Yeah.
So if you could give these folks one piece of advice, just one, or two if you need to, what would that be about this grant?
About after you have the grant?
Yeah, just about, I guess it could be anything, like, don't do it, run, Forrest, run, whatever.
Do your business plan and get as much free help as you can, because it's out there. There's lots of free help.
Well, I encourage any farmer to really take a stand, because this is critical for our region to produce food that are local grown. And the Washington grown branding, it's out there seeking some of our small farmers to get in there. The more of us getting in it, and if we can take opportunity to apply, even if it's hard, you don't get it this year, you can always go back the next year and apply one more time. Don't give up.
Okay, can I do 3 pieces of advice?
Okay.
Okay, number 1, do an application. Everyone should do an application. Number 2, I would say take advantage of the resources at NABC. Next Thursday, there's going to be a boot camp all day where these two will be there going through the whole process to kind of lay out exactly what you need to do to get started now, so that when the application period opens, you're ready to go.
6-hour class, give some more information.
Yeah.
It's going to be at the Skagit Farmer Supply in Burlington. I've got a sheet up here if you want to give me your name neatly written with an email. I can email you a link and information.
And then my 3rd piece of advice is to keep your application simple. Whatever you're doing now, do an application to do more of that. You don't have to go say, well, I need to start making cheese, or I need to start drying blueberries or putting apples in a bag. Selling it locally and showing that you can do more of that with the help is value added. And I would say, and keep the expenses simple as well. My first grant, I did all these little receipts for like $5.41 and $8.42, and poor Brandon, I'd email him a stack of paper that big that he'd have to print out for pretty small checks. Well, now I just have basically like 3 expense lines, and they're all big ticket items. So it doesn't have to be everything I could have gotten covered, but I was able to show expenses all the way up to the $250,000. So So keeping it simple, I think, makes it easier for you to apply, and it makes it easier for them to fund you.
So how about, we kind of start a little bit late, but how about some questions? Like, are they, yeah?
How do you divide your contribution to the match?
How do you divide it to the match
Like,
in the
are
application?
you all contributing more than 50% of the value of the crop that you are
Yeah,
growing?
you-
like
Yes.
eggs
you-
or
yeah,
kale
you-
or blueberries, things
Yeah,
like
you
that?
have to do that. You do, our match is 51% of, at least of blueberries, whatever we use of our
Yeah.
own blueberries. And we produce more now than we grow, so we do buy berries, but and then those berries that we buy can be a match, as long as it's less than 50%.
Well, eligible expense, I mean.
Right, an expense,
Match, yeah.
so, yeah, right. So we match with our own berries, and we match with our time,
Okay.
and that can be 25% is labor, and 25% is expenses. Like you can turn in receipts to things that are grant eligible.
Or paying the processing for it?
Right,
Right.
absolutely. And it's pretty easy to make the match when you consider the commodity value of your product. So for me, with eggs, it's like, well, what is the commodity value if it's not locally grown, certified organic, pasture raised? That's my match, what I could sell it for. And so I count that as the match, and then I pay people to do the processing and buy the packaging and all of that, and then submit all of that to Brandon, and then get 50% of that total back. If that makes sense.
Any other
Does that help
questions?
you decide how much to borrow or to write the grant for, apply for? I mean, look at how much you can match first and then decide how
Not
much you
really,
want to.
look at how much your project's gonna cost, and then that's what you'll apply for. When you do all your numbers and figure out how much, I mean, go for all of it, right? I mean, that's my opinion, but,
If you can
Yeah.
get there with your time and the commodity match, and it's pretty
Yeah.
easy to do
yeah.
that.
However, our next project, if we do a next one, it won't be as big as these projects, so that'll be something that I'll be weighing out is how much exactly would we ask for, cause it wouldn't be, cause you have to spend it within 3 years, right?
And you don't want to just make up numbers. You really do want to do the research now and say, because if you say, oh, I'm going to spend $10,000 on a website and it only costs you $3,000, well, now you've left $7,000 on the table that you could have put towards something else. Or the reverse, you go, oh yeah, I'm never going to spend more than $3,000 on a website, and the person you hire is 20. Well, again, you just want your numbers to make sense in the application.
You really want to right-size it. I mean, and part of that is, for your business is, what are your sales going to be? And then that should, you gauge your production toward your sales, then, you'll get the balance that way. And Brandon didn't have time to go into depth on there's 5 different types of value added. There's change of state, which is like, blueberries into jam. There's, basic productions, things like organic or non-GMO verified would be another one. There's a third one, which is kind of separation of product. I grow some regular corn, I grow non-GMO corn, which nobody ever does. And the other one is on-farm power. It has to be used on farm, which nobody ever does. And the fifth one is a big gimme, and it's like 2013, 2014, they upped the commodity match from 25 to 50%. Hallelujah! I mean, so you just use your crop and you're there. And they decided that local food was value added. So all you have to do is have a market that's within the state of Washington or a 400-mile radius of your farm, and that's value added. And so what I tell people, if you're a row crop grower, it's once it's into the packing house, so it could be washing the lettuce, packing the lettuce, everything after that, and any kind of working capital other than owner wages, is fair game. So it's distribution, it's packaging, it's marketing. It could be vehicle insurance for your delivery vehicle. It could be farmer's market booth fee. It could be all that different kind of stuff. And just imagine, and again, I've kind of turned people thinking about like having to do a value-added product such as this, is just imagine that next year, half of your operating expenses post-harvest were paid for. Then the money's in the bank, and you can do whatever you want. So you can go buy equipment, or you can build a packing shed, or you can do whatever you want. So I think that's really the best strategy is to capture dollars for your existing business, get yourself in a position of strength, so you can think strategically about that cash flow that you get from this grant, and continue to move your farm towards expansion or sustainability or wherever you need to go. Question back there.
I had a question about financing. So, since the program seems like it runs on a reimbursement basis, I'm just interested if you guys had to get some sort of bridge loan to be able to do the work, but then it's going to get reimbursed, or was there a financing aspect that you were thinking through when you're trying to build out this value-added side?
No, we not for us. We sold enough berries that we had a little bit of money in the account to be able to fund it. Yeah.
Well, for me, because I looked at the line of credit, that's what I looked at, and then I just put at that in case. And then my raw commodity was the main match because I grow everything, and then I match my my thing. But my line of credit was just like in case they needed to know whether I can, and of course, then I had that to be able to start, buying, packaging, and then processing, and then submit my receipt. So I did that with my line of credit. But everything I matched was my raw commodities. Yeah.
And
So-
they're really quick about reimbursement.
Yeah.
So, if you look at it, it's like if you've got a month worth of ability to fund yourself, then submit it, 7 to 10 days later, you have that check. Especially given that you're counting your commodity as an expense, that wasn't an actual out-of-pocket expense, right? So for me, it's like, oh, I have all these eggs. Well, I'm now selling them to the program in a sense, for $2.99 as my match. And then, but in the meantime, I've gone and I've sold it to a store for more than that.
But depending on the business plan, I've worked with 2 different projects where we have secured a line of credit, based on the grant being funded. So that can be done if you know your lender and you've got a business plan and you got credibility, you got markets. That we've been able to do that. Yes. Any other questions? Is it lunchtime? It's lunchtime. Okay. For more information or whatever, sign up right here, and I can also send you Brandon's presentation as well if you just fill out name legibly, email legibly. I don't want to get 15 bounce backs.